Back in 2015, Warner Brothers released Batman Arkham Knight on PS4, Xbox One, and PC. The PC version was unique at the time in that it was an absolute train wreck at a time when the PC version of a game was always considered to be the best version. That is not how things are anymore. In the 7 years that have passed since then, the idea of the PC version of the game being the best version has evaporated into thin air. It's gone. Instead, we are really seeing tons of issues when we play games on PC nowadays. So, well, let's just get into it. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx we ask the question, what the hell is going on with PC ports? So, I'm not necessarily sure I would call Arkham Knight our flashpoint for this issue. Although, it's a nice little trip down memory lane if you want to go back to our very first Before You Buy, where Jake reviewed the console version of the game and mentioned the whole controversy with the PC one, but was pretty safely nestled away in the good version of the game, where PC games became a big business again, and they intentionally developed games side by side with one another on PC and consoles with the intent to do well on both. Arkham Knight actually came out during this era, and generally, PC ports I don't think were at their worst. But if one can remember back to the 90s, things looked a lot more similar to how they do now. Back in those days, PC architecture and console architecture was completely different. An Intel Pentium was nothing like a Sega Genesis, which was running on a Motorola processor dropped into an adaptation of Sega's System 16 arcade board, or Super Nintendo, which was just an entirely custom processor built by Nintendo. In fact, this was basically the problem with PC ports up through the PS3 and the Xbox 360. The fact was, consoles and PC were just fundamentally different things. So it made sense that Sonic 3 and Knuckles on PC, the original port, was terrible, because every PC port from a console game was terrible. But sometime in that Xbox 360 PS3 era, developers were just like, you know what, PCs are better, and these consoles suck to develop on. Let's make the PC version better. And we actually saw that a fair amount. Still, when a game would come out on consoles first, like, say, Dead Space back in 2008, apparently. Wow. I know we talked about the Dead Space remake a bunch recently, but I always forget how old that game is because it just holds up so well. Still, the PC version of that was exemplary of the problems of PC ports of console-only games because, well, it basically had to just make the game again. How many people have ever played GTA 4 on PC? There are guides, not to how to beat the game. Like, these walkthroughs are not about playing the game. They're about letting you play the game. Seriously, guides for getting the game to run smoothly on a modern PC. This is a game that came out like 15 years ago for just vastly inferior hardware. But that was the PS3, Xbox 360 era. When the PS4 and the Xbox One came out with much more similar architecture to PCs, the PS4 and the Xbox One both had x86 CPU architecture, which basically makes them not far from being a PC. I mean, it doesn't make them PCs, but the similarities are much more vast. Like, the thing that makes a PS3 similar to a PC is that they are electronics. They have CPUs. But once you get into the actual mechanics of how they work, they're actually pretty different on a functional level, you know, inside the chips. That stopped with the PS4 and the Xbox One. For a while, I don't think this was actually to the detriment of PC gaming. In fact, I think it actually provided a bit of an argument for prioritizing PC development. Hey, we can make the game on PC and then just sort of adapt to the specific hardware of these two consoles and strip back without having to do a whole lot in terms of code. I'm definitely oversimplifying to some extent, but it's a lot closer to that than in the previous console generations. That being said, although I'm sure that tons of executives that don't know what they're talking about heard that type of simplification and thought, well, that's it. all of our problems have been solved. There are still differences between consoles and PC. Probably the most notable one is how memory works. Now, I'm not going to dive too deep into it, but the key here is that PCs have both dedicated system memory and VRAM as well. What makes that different from a console is that consoles just got memory, man. There is no dedicated memory in a console. All of the memory is used by all of the things. So in terms of development, this is a pretty major difference. So a PC having more memory total doesn't necessarily make it better at running something that was written for a console. In fact, due to the split nature of its RAM, actually has a little bit of extra work. When you've got two sets of memory, you gotta figure out where everything is gonna go. And a lot of the time, something needs to go to both places at different times. So, once again, we have two diverging sets of code, the PC version and the console one. Keeping in mind that having the x86 architecture still makes it vastly more similar than at any time in the past. So here's where I start to think that it gets really interesting. You would think that consoles moving to the x86 architecture would make people think, well, we can do the PC version and scale down. It kind of seems to have had the opposite effect, and now it seems like there are a lot more games that are developed console first and scaled up. More like the 1990s, like I said, coming full circle, things are more like then, albeit for different reasons. I mean, technically different reasons. If you want to talk about what's really driving it, it's all business. In the 1990s, they were developing things on the console first because they were going to sell more games on the consoles, and the PC was such a different architecture, it was kind of an afterthought. Now, when the architecture is so similar, they've gone through a couple of cycles where they've rethought this stuff and then arrived back at the conclusion, we sell more copies of the games on the consoles, so we should develop there first. And somebody's going to interpret that as it's corporate greed, man. And anybody who's paid any degree of attention to me over the years I've been involved in gameranx, you know my opinion on corporate greed. I don't think I need to justify what I'm about to say by reminding you specifically about what I've said in the past, but I actually kind of don't think it's corporate greed. This is a very practical decision. The fact is, a PC, although much more powerful, much more flexible, and capable of so many different things, it's not a gaming machine, and a gaming console is. That being said, I PC game more than I do console game now at this point in my life. I prefer it, and I think that it's better. But practically speaking, it makes perfect sense that the consoles are being prioritized. Why? Because there's 3 sets of hardware. 2 if you're talking the ones that actually have any beef whatsoever. The Switch really is not a beefy console at this point. But when you make a game for the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series, you are locked to specifications. The hardware is the same in every PlayStation 5. When you design a game for the PlayStation 5, there's little quirks and eccentricities that all interact with each other and allow you to eke out certain performance gains in certain areas, and there's certain detriments that you have to avoid in certain ways. And it will always be the same on that hardware. Even when they release the PlayStation 5 Plus, it's gonna be compatible hardware that's a little bit better. All the same stuff is still gonna apply. It is not a radically different configuration, and no matter how much more powerful PCs are, the number of configurations that exist in PC gaming is staggering. It's probably not countable. It's that high. Compared to 1 for the PlayStation 5, 2 for the Xbox Series, you got the S and the X, and eventually you're going to throw in the upgraded versions of both of these consoles, but still, you can count it on a single hand. Unless you have a spreadsheet and understand formulas, it's unlikely you're even going to be able to figure out how many different configurations there are in the PC gaming world. I don't know if you can. I really don't. I'm not going to try, personally. It's not important information. But just from the perspective of shaders, according to Wikipedia, a shader is a computer program that calculates the appropriate levels of light, darkness, and color for the rendering of a 3D scene. Shaders tend to be different based on GPU rendering pipelines, so hey, how many different GPUs are there in the various consoles? One, the shader's gonna be the damn same all the time on a console game. So guess what you do? You write a shader that's compatible with that console. Granted, you're probably going to write different shaders for different locations because in terms of environmental effects, things are often different in different places in the game. But those shaders are all going to be written for the same graphics pipeline and don't require any kind of adaptation. Shaders, on the other hand, for the PC, have to continually be adapted for different configurations. So a PC game is continually recompiling shaders as you visit new areas in a game. That is, of course, work being done that could be done doing anything else. Now, in a perfect world, budgets and deadlines would be set up so that the version of the game that comes out for each platform is the best it can possibly be at launch. As we know, that is not how things go, even when a game is only released on PC or only released on consoles. We are very often seeing games released in incomplete states. So when you have a game exist across these two different paradigms, the one that's most likely to make the most money, generally the one that is geared specifically towards the function of playing a game, is going to be the one that gets the attention first. I don't want that to read as a defense, however, because frankly, I think we're all fed up with both of the issues I just talked about. A, incomplete games being released, and B, PC ports of games coming out and sucking. Like, I think that people are actually starting to get to a point where it's too much. And as game budgets get bigger and scope expands, the question I feel like we're starting to ask isn't, hey, can you stop delaying the games? Like it has been in the past. Like, delays have started to get pretty irritating. The question we're starting to ask more is, hey, executives, can you give the damn developers enough time so that all of the versions of the game that we get are completed before we get them? Like, I did the before you buy on Wild Hearts, which is a fantastic game that exhibits both of these issues hard. And it's a big enough slap in the face that the game was basically released incomplete everywhere. But for those of us who would prefer to play the game on PC, myself included, we get a special level of bad. Again, not bad in terms of the game. I'd had nothing but praise for this game. It's just, this has become such a standard, normal issue for multi-platform releases. And I know at this point, this is kind of just a rant, but any developers or publishers, especially any executives who happen to be watching this, I think you could really, really engender a lot of goodwill by simply carving out timetables for development that allow you to give the PC port enough attention that it's good. At least as good as the console version. But then that brings us into the whole unfinished game issue, which is, it goes beyond this, obviously. Let's use this issue as a start point for our conversations in the comment section, though. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. The best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.